some of you may know that I'm not only in my mid-50s, going to be past my mid-50s, but also that I got all kinds of joint issues. Okay, this is what happens when you don't take care of your body when you're young. And so in my 40s, I was having all kinds of pain. I have no cartilage in my left knee. I blew out both my hip labrums, so they're both torn. And then they couldn't figure out why I was hurting it, and to a point where actually I couldn't walk for a little while. It's kind of strange. Nobody in their early or late 40s should have ability to not walk, right? But it hurt so bad that I was kind of like, yeah, if you can't even get around, I couldn't get upstairs. I had to kind of climb myself upstairs and didn't want to come down. It was a painful time. I was just really complaining with God. Partly was because there was emotional and mental issues that were going on in my life, post-trauma. And so I remember just thinking to myself, if I'm already having a difficult time just even walking, what was the prospects of my life and ministry going forward? I remember just praying and complaining before God, saying, God, are you with me? Why is all hitting this together, not only the emotional and the mental, but the physical difficulties? And I remember hearing him just ask me, just tell me, walk. That's the one word I heard, walk. I was like, God, it hurts. Just walk. So out of a simple obedience, this was in like December, I started walking outdoors. Late at night, after everything was done, my wife is all tucked away, and my daughter was living at home at the time, and I just kind of walked outside for 10, 15 minutes. And it was surprising. In the cold, walking outside when nobody's there, there's this peace. And I would be talking with God and just walking. Every day I would walk a little more and try to, and over time, and I ended up being able to figure out what was wrong with my body. I had sciatica, and so I had got PT for physical training for that. And I was able to not only walk, but actually be more active. And it was just kind of like, thank you, Lord, right? His way of getting me out of that rut was simply just to walk. But interestingly enough, as I'm talking with him and listening to him, and he's telling me more than simply just walk, he would actually, and for about a good 7 months, every other day, I would hear him say, walk with me. Yeah. Well, I'm trying, I'm going on these walks with you, Lord. I'm talking to you. Ultimately, actually, you guys know that I go and I do, feeling stronger, I'm doing this hiking. I never hiked much or did backpacking till I couldn't walk anymore. But something kind of clicked in my heart because I was watching this YouTube of a guy who does through hiking, going all the way, hiking all the way from Georgia all the way to Maine, or from California all the way from Mexico all the way to Canada. And he was talking about walking human speed, right? 3 miles an hour, 2 miles an hour. How that's how we're built to live, okay? Not driving 60, 70, or flying hundreds of miles an hour, but just walking human speed. And that's kind of connected with me. But God actually was telling me more than just walk with me. And it meant more than simply just my times and my, walking the dogs or walking or going to the mountains. He would tell me, meet me on the mountain. This is a picture I took of my campsite right at the bottom of Mount Hood. Not bottom, this is almost at the top. But over those times, this was God actually, I didn't realize it, inviting me to a deeper relationship with him. It was an invitation. Because actually when somebody says, come, let's go for a walk, right? If it's your father whom you love, or your mother, or you're a friend, a really good friend, or if it's a lover, okay, a spouse, and they say, come go for a walk with me, it is an invitation to deep connection. Because as you walk, you experience the same thing together. As you walk, you're actually journeying together. You have this freedom in motion to pay attention to the other, to listen to them, to be with them, to enjoy them. And honestly, if you've ever gone hiking or on a backpacking trip, you get so connected with the person that you're with simply because you're walking together. Yeah. So if anybody invites you, okay, if it's a stranger who gives you the creeps, invites you, come for a walk with me, don't go, right? But if it's somebody who actually you want to grow closer to, or you can do it yourself, okay? As busy as you are, take 15 minutes and say, let's drop everything, wifey of mine, come for a walk with me. Watch what it does, yeah? It even works for dogs, okay? These are my dogs, right? Because in fact, dogs don't trust you. You're not part of the pack unless you've gone on a walk together. It's crazy. In fact, dogs, when they're all messed up, have all kinds of trauma, they don't know how to be a dog. You know how you resurrect a dog to be a dog? You get them in the pack and you go on a walk. And all of a sudden, they emerge. I have belonging. I know who I am. It's very interesting. The dog on the left, she's a pandemic puppy, so she doesn't like people. So when my grandfather, my father-in-law, my daughter's grandfather, when he comes over, she hides with her tail tucked. Okay, she's a scary dog, right? She's a killer. But when my father-in-law comes, she hides. Well, we went on a hike together, and afterwards, she went over and she licked him. Yeah. Something happens when you are invited to go on a walk. Not just because you're a dog, but actually as a human. Something happens. You share something. A connection's made. A word for this is communion. Not what we do at the first Sunday of each month, with the bread and the juice. That's also communion. It's a sign of this deep connection and belonging and covenant we have with God. But this is talking about our personal relationship with God and our personal relationship with others. I commune with God more and more these days because I realized when Christ was asking me to walk with him, it wasn't just for the walks, the physical walks, but to spend time enjoying him, hearing him, bringing my heart to him, knowing him. And sometimes I don't even talk. I'm just there. Yeah. Sometimes I'm praying and God says, stop praying, just be. And I can sit there for 15, 20, 30 minutes. Sometimes I go on a retreat and I'm there for a long time. I don't even realize time has passed because I'm communing with God. The more and more I grow as a person in Christ. Yes, as a pastor, okay, but as a person in Christ. This experience of connection, communion. We use the language intimacy with God, but nobody likes to hear that, okay? Okay? All the guys, when they say, how intimate are you with God? You start going, ugh. And some of the ladies too. But what does that reveal? Our uncomfortableness, even with the language of intimacy with God, reveals that we do not know what it means to be that close to him. It kind of scares us. We don't have that kind of access and experience, or sometimes even the desire. And so our relationship with God stays far when God is always inviting us on a walk with him. We use this language to describe your closeness with God. Okay? If you're in a Christian circle, has anybody asked you, how's your walk? Right? I remember that a non-Christian guy was in our setting, and he heard somebody say, how's your walk? And he's like, what's wrong with my walk? I'm walking fine, They don't understand this is a way of describing your relationship with God. Where did we get that? We got that from the Scriptures. That this is a way the Scriptures describe what it means to know God. That there is no way to know God and not walk with him. Today we're starting a whole new series on what it means to commune, to walk with God, walk closely, to grow closer with God every single day. And an accumulation of stacking days after days, a lifetime spent actually getting to really know and enjoy God. We did a whole sermon series on what is God like? God is ... right? And when the first one we talked about is he's knowable. He wants to be known. He wants us to have not only a kind of a general awareness that he is God, and not only a saving experience that he actually is God and he's forgiven us and we have this hope, but actually he wants us to have a lived rhythm of communion with him. So much so that it becomes unbroken. If you talk to those who have walked with God, even during the most painful experiences, God is still there. Even the most boring, mundane times, they are in the presence of God. And so I'm only going to take 4 weeks here. I know there's 5 sermons, 5 Sundays here, but Pastor Finn's going to fill in a sermon on the 12th of October. And we're just going to talk about what it means to walk closely with God. Firstly, to reveal and reflect that this is always what God has wanted. And in fact, this is supposed to be our top and our highest priority. That if we don't want and don't plan and don't prioritize walking with God, we end up missing out. God remains a stranger, which is kind of tragic if you think of it. Because God, that's the last thing God wants us to be. So we're going to talk about walking with God. We find that this is something you find early in the scriptures, this language. Maybe best known for this is a guy named Enoch, okay? We have an Enoch in our community, and it's a great name to name someone because Enoch stands out amongst his peers, stands out. So much so that he's even remembered in the book of Hebrew as a spiritual great, the Hall of Fame, for something about the way that he lived. And it's described in Genesis chapter 5, verse 22 as this. Enoch walked with God. Enoch walked with God. He only lived for 365 years. That doesn't seem like weird. Like, what? He only lived for 365 years? Because a lot of the people, his father and his father's father and his actually great-grandson, Methuselah, lives for over 1,000 plus. So this is a time, that genre of writing is not necessarily kind of our context. Age is being described as something a little differently. I'm not of the kind of type who says that this is exactly, perfectly, it could be, but I just read it by genre, and that genre is not necessarily saying that. There's a lot of reasons why, too. 365 is a very familiar number, isn't it not? When you hear 365, what do you hear? Yeah, a year the earth goes around, right? A perfect, complete cycle, right? If you look at all of the people that cited in Genesis chapter 4 and 5, and the ages are given, they match the cycles of the heavens, of Jupiter and Saturn and other kinds of things. Just letting you know that there's something going on here that's not necessarily just literal, but perfect life spent as a human, okay, living on terra firma. 365 years. Why did he go so early? Yeah? And we're going to look into that. Something is special about him, so much so that not only did he have a short life, but in fact, it says, Enoch walked with God and he was not. What? God took him. Enoch never died. Can you imagine that? There's something about his relationship with God where he walked with him that translated this early in human history to him living with God forever. It is a symbolic picture of the destiny of those who walk with God. Why does God want us to walk with him? Because his plan for us is to walk with him and be with him forever. We see it even as early as Enoch. We see it in people like Noah. Noah is described as one who walked with God, the only one in his generation of all humanity. Can you imagine that? All humanity did not walk with God, but Noah did. We see it in the invitation that's given, the command that's given to Abraham. During a time of covenant and of promise, God says, I am the God Almighty. Walk before me. Walk with me. This describes relationship, starting all from the beginning of Adam and Eve. Genesis chapter 3, it talks about how God is heard walking in the garden in the cool of the day. Adam and Eve, and if you know the context, had just sinned. They had just eaten from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And something happened. They thought their eyes would be open. Instead, they only saw their own shame. And they couldn't be in free communion with each other. So what they do, they made fig leaves and they hid from each other. You guys remember this story? Yeah? They couldn't look at each other anymore. And so they hid from each other. And when God came to visit them, and as this verse in the Hebrew kind of implies pretty strongly, this was a normal thing. At the end of the day, in the cool of the day, when it's time to enjoy and relax, God would come and he would walk with them. Okay? And as he's coming, instead of, oh, God, you're here. Let me tell you about my day. This is what I named this animal, so on and so forth. I put some fertilizer around this, and it's grew and all so much fruit. Instead of all of that, they hid. It's an interesting place for us to realize that we were made for this kind of close connection, this idyllic experience in the Garden of Eden, of this sense of safety and abundance. You didn't have to worry about storms. You didn't have to worry about not having enough, because God would always provide. You had anything you wanted to eat, and you had love. You had safety. You had God's presence meeting you constantly. What an incredible experience we were always built for, and yet there was a choice that was made by Adam and Eve, one that is echoed by us day in, day out at times. When given the choice, do we choose God, to walk with him and his ways, to grow closer to him, to identify with and to commit to and delight in God? Or do we choose another way? That choice is constantly before us. It is the same choice that Adam and Eve faced in the garden. There are two trees, okay? And God said, you can eat of any tree, okay, including the tree of life. That choice was theirs. But instead of eating from the tree of life, they ate from the other tree. Tree of knowledge, good and evil. The tree that if you take, you're saying, I refuse to walk with you, God. I refuse to walk your way, to think your way, to love the things that you love and do it the way that you do it. I will choose to be God. Okay? And God said, don't do that. Okay? Don't do that. I want you to stay in a love relationship with me. You have everything you need, and we'll grow together. But interestingly enough, they chose the other tree. We are constantly given this choice in life. Even as a young person, but especially as we get older, the more responsibility, the more impact of our choices we find. The more we keep doing it, making the same kinds of choices, going down the same road, we find one looks like walking with God, one looks like not. The president of the seminary I went to, called Regent College, named James Houston, he's quite a learned man. He's kind of like old grandpa. Sometimes you don't know what he's saying, but he's the most well-read person I've actually met. This is ridiculous, the stuff that he reads, how broadly. But he's able to take centuries of spiritual wisdom, psychological understanding, theological awareness, historical awareness, and he basically boil it down. Okay, this is how you know somebody's a genius. They take something that is just so crazy and makes it so simple. He doesn't reduce it to something that loses its power, but he actually helps us to clarify. He says, you and I have a choice in this world. So simple. And the simple choice is this: either to seek to have power or seek to share love. Okay? Has anybody ever told you that that's the choices, that every choice you make goes along this line? To help us understand the divergence here, do we see life interpreted in terms of achievement? Okay? The more money you've made, the more people acknowledge you, the more things you have, the more security and significance you have by your work, by your gifts, by your ability, right? That not only did you go to Harvard, but your children went to Harvard. Does that make you somebody that feels like that has given you something worth pursuing, right? Okay. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't want to go to Harvard. or as a bad thing, but actually, if this is the priority of our life, this is the movement of our hearts, that this is what we want more than anything else, guess what? We're making these choices for power and achievement. Or do we make our choices for relationship? Relationship with God, relationship with others. Those who choose right relationships live a life of covenant, a covenant way of life, rather than a consumer, transactional way of life. That's the choice that's constantly before us. Do we choose to love, or do we turn our relationships even to a consumer one? He talks about how the psalmists are so big on wanting to be righteous, right with God and right with others, because this is the psalmist's way of saying there is only way to know and walk with God. That's right relationships. Choosing to love, not seek power. Choosing not achievement, but relationships. And this is how you know how your choices build and bear fruit. People who choose right relationships to share and experience love, they grow into this beautiful life of prayer and spiritual friendship. They become people who know how to commune. Those who have chosen achievement, power, and live a consumer way of life find relationships painful, and in fact, will choose to dump them. This choice was found in the garden that early, and Adam and Eve chose power. I'm going to grasp it, and I'm going to choose what is right and wrong. I'm going to make a name for myself. I'm going to use the things that are around me to make me feel good, feel strong, and do what I want to do. And so when they came before each other, their choices bore fruit. They could not be in right relationship. They had to hide from each other. And when God came a calling to go walking, they chose to hide themselves. Does this make sense? It's so simple, right? Well, we see it in the book of Genesis. We see these lines almost like given as a compare and contrast. Cain and Abel. Abel is choosing relationship. He's choosing covenant. He's choosing love and reverence to God. Abel is choosing power. And in anger and in violence, he murders his brother. Right? That choice echoes down to his children. Right? So we're seeing that here's Adam and Eve, and here's Cain, and here's Abel. And Abel dies, but there's this kind of there's this thread of the line of Seth. The line of Seth and how they live, what choices they are making versus this other line, that line of Cain. Cain has a son named Enoch, not the Enoch that we're talking about, and so on and so forth, down to the seventh son. So it's a seventh son of Adam from Cain's line. His name is Lamech, right? While the seventh son of Adam on Seth's line, his name is Enoch, the one that we're talking about, who walked with God. There's this massive contrast being made. Enoch pleased God so much that he escaped from death. He didn't die. He was brought to God's presence. And in fact, Enoch's great-grandson, Noah, walked with God and pleased God and actually saved all of humanity through the ark, all of creation through the ark. While Lamech is the seventh of the line, that his line eventually become the ones who trigger the flood. It started with Cain and Abel, but by the time you get to Lamech, you're able to see the fruit of this choice. Power, consumer, versus covenant, love, and relationship. Because Lamech, he sings this song. He says, my two wives, I can't remember their names right off the top of my head. My two wives, listen to me. I have killed a man for insulting me, for mildly harming me. And this is the genre of this song, is a sword song. He's carrying a sword and saying, look at me, look at how powerful I am. I am going to make double the name of sons. I'm more than double that other side. Okay, that's what it is. In fact, later on in his line, the sons of God, it's what they call themselves. They are capturing women and making harems of hundreds of women. They're dehumanizing women through violence and through their own sense of power. Lamech is an expression of when you make choices like this, not for relationship or righteousness or for love, but for power. His son, actually, Tubal-Cain, is the first metalworker. That's how he has a sword. Instead of making a plow, instead of making tools, he actually makes a weapon, right? Basically, this is a old, thousands year reflection of what technology can be. You're making something powerful, but you're not using it for relationships and love. You're using it for power. You're using it for transaction. You're using it actually for achievement. Okay? I went through the whole this thing. I did a Bible study last year on the book of Genesis. We went through the biblical theology of this. And you can see this so clearly laid out in this story. One side chooses power. Other side walks with God and wants relationship with God. Okay? This is still true now. What was true in the garden was true up to the flood is still true now. God is inviting us to walk, but oftentimes our first response is to hide. But God doesn't give up on us. He finds a way to engage us, and He's constantly inviting us to a deeper walk. He's constantly inviting us to keep choosing Him. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 2, walk, step, put one foot after another, and another, and another. Okay? Moment by moment, day by day, along this course, along with God, walk in love, as Christ also loved us and gave Himself up for us. Do you see this? When we know this, when this begins to grip our hearts, that this is the only choice we really, really have. And this is the most beautiful choice. This is the most high priority choice. Do I love God? Do I want Him? Do I want more of Him? Then all of our choices kind of pursue that main basic choice. The fruit of that is amazing. Versus, do I want this? And I don't care about what God wants for me, or I don't want God. Those who have experienced God and this pursuit, this communion with God, this is the kind of stuff they say. Having been one who pursued power and violence, Paul says, I had the pedigree, I had the education, I had the backing and the fame and all of the authority and power to even murder people in the name of God. That's how powerful Paul was. He says, but then, when I encountered Christ, everything flipped around. All these things that seem so valuable to pursue now has become like sewage. The word is scubalon, okay? It's if you've ever been in an open sewer, it's the most disgusting thing. It reeks like crazy. It's rotten feces, just decaying matter. It's disgusting. He's saying, all these things that were so pursuable, so valuable now, I won't let it near me, my heart, because it'll infect it. I count everything. That's a loss. That's not a gain, okay? Think of profit and loss, right? I thought that was worth something. Now I realize that takes away from the surpassing worth of knowing Jesus. He's experienced communion with God, unbroken, to a place where he will nothing could purchase that away from him. In fact, and if it ever could, it would become rubbish. Okay? Unfortunately, that rubbish, that radioactive stuff that when we embrace destroys us, we consider pursuable. This is the language of idols. Okay? It's very strange how idols, they grip our hearts. Okay? Thomas Aquinas described 4 key idols. Okay? So you saw what happened with Adam and Eve. You saw what happened with Lamech's generation and the flood. You're seeing what's happening actually. This is a medieval guy describing human condition. We haven't changed, okay? You think, in the medieval dark ages, they didn't know anything. No. They're holding on to the reality of what the scriptures have said. It's still true today. He says, here are the 4 idols, the main idols. Wealth, for what it can give you, make you feel. Power, pleasure. And he uses the word honor, but it's a kind of way of saying that you're puffed up. You got fame, you got recognition, that people see you, and that somehow how other people prize you becomes something that we're making an idol in your heart. There's an interesting exercise. You want to know what your idol is? Okay, you do this. Okay, this is from Arthur Brooks, I think. You do this. Look through that 4 list and choose the one that's not your idol. Okay, choose the one that's. I don't live after wealth. If I do, I would never have been a pastor. Okay, maybe in Africa or maybe in other places, but no, or Korea. But wealth is not what I'm after. If it really is, I would be in a different business, okay? I really don't think I'm after power. Honestly, I don't manipulate people or demand people to give me this, give me that. In fact, even in the home, I empower my wife. I try to as best I can. And I'm not really after pleasure, right? I can be. I think I have addictive personality, but that's not really. Number 4 is the one that I got to watch out for. That sometimes I'll build my reputation or my sense of worth on my reputation, right? What about you? Go through that list. Okay, it might be a helpful process to realize these choices are before you constantly. Yeah, these choices are before you constantly. But in the midst of that choice, God is constantly inviting you to walk with Him. What's your priority? What's your priority? Where do you spend your time? What will you give up in order to walk with Him? Okay? What will you give up to go see Taylor Swift? What would you give up for a Lamborghini? What would you give up for a McMansion? What would you give up? Right? That tells you where your priorities are. What did Jesus give up to stay in communion with God and open it up that we can have communion with God? That tells you what is valuable to Him. Matthew 3:17, we see Jesus humbling Himself as the second person of the Trinity, going and get baptized. And as He comes up out of this stance of beautiful humility and wanting to stay in relationship with God, He hears this, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased." And what does He do? He's thrust into the wilderness and He gives up food for 40 days. Okay? And He's tempted with these specific idols, but He refuses to break communion. He loves God too much. He echoes this, "And He who sent me is with me." He's talking about His Father. Communion. He's with me. I'm with Him. "He has not left me alone, for I always do the things that are pleasing to Him." Isn't that interesting? What's on His mind? What's so important to Him? What's the most important thing for Him? Yes, to fulfill the mission. Yes, to save us. But it's because He has this communion with the Father. That's what Enoch has. The reason why he was taken was because he was pleased God. He delighted in God. And this heart of responding yes to come walk with me. Your whole life, come walk with me. It pleased God so much. That's what God's after. What does it look like for somebody to have this? Was Jesus depressed? Do you ever imagine Jesus like, "Oh man, Jesus, God made me come all the way down here in the stink, to be hated by these Pharisees, these hypocrites, and these people who are going to abandon me, and they crucify me. Oh my gosh, I just want to go and watch Netflix. I just want to relax. But now after all these people are coming and they want healing, right? You ever see Jesus no, Jesus is filled with a sense of, He has nothing. He doesn't even have a place to put his head. That's what he says. Foxes have holes, birds have nests. Even the Son of Man has nowhere to put his head. But he is deeply satisfied. Yeah? In pain, he still trusts and walks with God. Jesus is the person who's described as having the most joy of every human who's ever lived. And when you think about that, you're thinking, joy, that must be like, woohoo, yes! Happy all the time, ecstatic. Ooh, right? Right? But actually, I'm wrestling with this. During one of my mountain experiences, God says, I'm going to give you joy. I'm going to anoint you with joy. And I didn't understand what that meant. I didn't understand. Like, God, I might have this experience like Paul who went to the third heaven. I'm going to have is what's coming my way? Really good steak that's going to make me so happy. What's coming my way? And none of that's come. And I'm like, okay, God, either you're not telling me correctly or I'm interpreting this wrong. And I've been wrestling with this. I'm talking to my spiritual director, and I'm talking with my spiritual friends, and something was opened up to me, and I get it now. This is James Houston who described this, but he's saying the climax of joy, the end and the result and the whole mountaintop experience of joy is not ecstatic, euphoric happiness. Okay, that's part of it. But actually, the better way to describe it is contentment. You are so satisfied with God. Nothing could make you happier. Okay? Can you imagine that? You are so satisfied with your spouse, you don't need any other woman. You're so satisfied with your child, you will never have to compare. You're so satisfied with your calling, you never think about giving up. You're so satisfied with God that even if you are hungry, don't matter. I have Jesus. It's a part of me walking with him. He's with me. He's never left me. He won't leave me alone. And I think that's what it is. How few of the people that you know walk with God to a place where they can say, I've learned contentment. So much so that I don't need power, wealth, fame, pleasure. I get all of what I need from God. And this is just a little appetizer of what it's going to be like in heaven. You make choices for power and you go along that road. You don't only miss out on God in this life. Where do you end up? Bereft of him for eternity. Okay? And facing judgment. Those choices are scary, but they're played out in our lives daily. When you become someone who knows how to commune with God, you are deeply satisfied. Your greed, your anger, your lust, all of this ugly stuff in your heart is gone. You become a different person. You become one who's able to give yourself away like Jesus does because it's of your communion with God. Then you're able to be in community. Okay? When you're in community and all you care about is power, you become a destroyer of community. And it's going to show up in your choices. Okay? Your family's going to be a mess. Your friendship's going to be a mess. Your church will be a mess because of the choices for power. That happens for pastors and leaders too. But isn't community supposed to be a place of people who are wanting to commune with God? Right? If church is a place where you come to talk football with your friends, okay, that's not spiritual community. It's a form of, right? But that's not the same. And I love that little comment. I preached a whole sermon on what spiritual friendship looks like, but the comment was this. Community is just a gathering of spiritual friends. Friends who want to commune with God, and their job is to help you and walk with you as you are walking with God. Wouldn't you want a community like that? Where instead of having to hide, you're wrestling with something God told me this, and I don't know what to do. I talk to my spiritual friend, talk to my spiritual director, I talk to people, and they're helping me walk with God, grow closer with God. Well, don't you want a community like that? That comes when we invest in our walk with God. I think that's one of the reasons why Rooted is such a powerful thing. You spend 10 weeks journeying daily, thinking about Him, reflecting, praying, growing, being challenged, and saying yes together. And then you find that you've got spiritual friends. Yeah. As I finish off, I want to be reminded, you and I were constantly being invited. No matter where you've gone, how far you've walked off the beaten path of Christ, He's inviting you back. Know me. Walk with me. Maybe even one step's going to be hard because it hurts, because you have to give up certain things. Okay? But I can tell you, one step followed by another, the thing that will show up is you will be aware, you will draw near, you will experience a closeness with God. There's just no other way. If He invited you, there's no way He's going to diss you. Okay? And so this is the context from which we share this quote. You are as close to God as you choose to be. Okay? Would you say that to yourself? You don't say it out loud. You can say, I'm as close to God as I choose to be. Okay? I'm as close to God as I choose to be. Why can you say that? It's not because you have the right to force closeness from God, to demand it, to take it from Him whenever you want. No, it's because He's inviting you. And every step you take toward Him, okay? I have all the bunch of verses I can give you, like draw near to God and draw near to God and draw near to you. Seek Him and He will find Him because He's already looking for you pretty much. All that verses are there. But this is a distillation of that simple truth. If you are not feeling close to God, and it's not a shame thing, it's your fault. It's an invitation. You're as close to God as you choose to be. You're as close to God as you choose to be. Because He's inviting you for a walk. We're going to talk about this series and how to have this walk with God. But for today, would you just bow your heads with me?